Okay, looks like we are live. We're back at Shenanigans here live on a Mondays with Mick, and we're finally back on a Monday, Mick. It's been a few weeks since we've been here on a Monday, but happy to be here on a Monday. We got to grab our guest, one of our guests. Again, we got Remy with us. She's here training with us again today, so she's doing an awesome job. So, there we go. Want to thank our sponsor. Who's our sponsor? Oh, Riverview Insurance. Brother Tom Weidenbach and his team over at Riverview Insurance. We thank him for all the help that he gives us. So, especially this time of year, Mick, we've talked about all my fundraising that I have to do for Higher Power Sports.
Yes.
January and February are tough months for that with the weather and everything. So appreciate everybody that helps us out. And Mick, what are you working on for Sanford Health News?
Well, just started on a story today that has to do with Sanford Power, but it's kind of their philosophy is kind of a core. Okay, we're going to worry about both core physically, but core athletic skills that you're going to have and that are easily adaptable to any sport, and making sure you're stronger and faster and less prone to injury, those types of things. But for a lot of people, especially the North Dakota Sanford folks, hockey's obviously a big emphasis there, and there's some very specific programs that are in place and very popular within the Sanford system that have to do with hockey and build skill level, build obviously your athletic ability, and so that's one I'm working on. Yeah.
Awesome. Sounds like an interesting week that you got going, and an interesting article that you're gonna write. You call them articles at the Health News, or what do you call them?
Articles, stories. We flip flop on them once in a while, but thanks for asking.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to sound stupid like I usually do, but hey, because Coach Deckert joins us, the head boys basketball coach over at Brandon Valley.
Stupid.
But for a couple of weeks, we had a volleyball player and a volleyball coach on here, and we didn't sound very smart when we were talking. Not that I'm going to sound smart talking to a basketball coach, but I know a little bit more about basketball. Coach Deckert, thanks for joining us today. Did you just come from practice, or is your team just ready for the playoffs and you don't need practice?
No,
It's like when something weird happens and then you don't call the timeout because you think your players are better trained. They don't even practice anymore.
Practice. No, we practice today. We're at that time of the year where, we had 3 games last week. We only had 1 day off on Sunday, obviously. So when we came back today, we were only going to go an hour. So after we got warmed up, we kind of just got right into it. Guys are pretty competitive this time of year. So once we get their body ready, we want to get them in and out of there in 45 minutes to an hour right now. So practice is really short, kind of condensed. And when I mean practice, I mean like when we're really competing and getting after each other. So we do go really short right now. What does make it a little bit longer is we might actually shoot for another 45 minutes after that. So, the team with the most points still wins. So we still got to practice on putting the ball in the basket once in a while.
Absolutely. And before we'll go back to your team and what you got going this year, but for those that don't know Coach Deckert, maybe give a little background on, maybe where you grew up and how'd you end up at Brandon Valley?
That's a great question. That could be a loaded question in a lot of ways. I grew up in a small town in Minnesota. And there's a lot of things I think about with small towns. We have almost our entire coaching staff is made up of guys that are small town guys that grew up in very small towns, 800 to 1,000 people. And I don't think that's an accident. I think that there's a lot to be said about people that grow up in a small town, let alone, easy or harder. We could argue different points with that being said, but I think just the whole small town aspect is something that it lends itself more towards a family situation. But regardless, grew up in a small town,
Let's go
my-
specific here. I'm in
Okay.
Minnesota. Henning,
Henning, Minnesota. Yep.
how many people live there?
Counting the nursing home, probably 800
Okay.
or so. At least that's what it was, about 30 years ago when I was there. That's still what the population sign says, somewhere around 800.
Okay.
But my dad owned a small grocery store, one of 3 small grocery stores in Henning. So it was, we had something to do 7 days a week, and you had to go to work. And I think that's one thing where I think that, quite honestly, I think that's how I probably fell in love with basketball, because it was my hatred of working in that grocery store. And my dad would get me up in the morning and maybe go to work with him all the time. And I'll never forget when I was in middle school, I just walk out some morning and I'd just start shooting hoops. And then all of a sudden he would leave. And then I would walk back to the grocery store in the morning, and he would say, and I would walk in, I'd go, why don't you give me a ride? I mean, you woke me up. And he would say, well, you were shooting. So, and again, we talk about not being smart. I'll be the first one to say that I'm probably not, if there's more than one person in the room, I'm probably not the smartest in the room. But I did know enough to get out. If my dad liked basketball enough that if I was shooting at 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, whatever, and if he was going to work, he would let me stay and shoot. So I literally, when I'd get up in the morning and not eat breakfast, and I'd go out and shoot, and he'd drive off to work, and I'd go right back and go back to bed. Well, I mean, eventually he figured me out eventually, but it's just one of those deals where I kind of think that that's kind of what started everything. I just think that, it was something that was important to him. He wished he would have been a better player. He wished he would have had time when he was growing up in the 40s to be a better basketball player. And I think that's, some of the things that he always provided for me is that if I wanted to do something like that, that I was more than welcome to do that. And I would even get time off of work. So again, I tried to use it to my advantage.
That's awesome. Did you have siblings? Did they play that same role?
I had an older, no, they didn't. I had an older brother who actually enjoyed working in a grocery store, and I had an older sister who she was given no choice. She either had to work in the grocery store or she had to be home with mom, one or the other. So it was kind of an old-fashioned family, let's say, growing up. Ladies weren't given much of a choice. I mean, you either had to do this or that, and that was unfortunately, and thank goodness it's not that way today. But at the same time, you just never thought anything of it back then.
No, that's exactly true.
Absolutely. So you in Henning, you had some success there. Once your dad let you shoot, but that carried over to some success on the court as well.
Sure. We had some nice teams in high school. I played basketball with three of my really good buddies to this day. All 3 of them were 1,000-point scorers. So I did a lot of this and a lot of being in the stands and a lot of our, like whenever I ever tried to shoot a little bit too much, coach was pretty direct back then. I mean, it wasn't, we weren't too worried about feelings or saying things the right way. Let's just put it that way back then. So you kind of, it was very, very clear at a young age, what you could and what you couldn't do. And if you were a good player, good for you. But again, I felt very fortunate being, easily the 4th best player on my team. I certainly had a role to play, but that role was definitely defending and screening and getting those guys the ball where they needed to score. So, I mean, I learned a lot. I think I learned a lot just from that experience alone, let alone trying to move on to college and Morehead State and so on and so forth. But no, great experiences. I would go back. Again, I'd coach on this concrete floor. We have a beautiful facility in Brandon, but looking back at it, I wouldn't be worried about staying in a small town versus a big town in any circumstance.
So was Brandon your first job? Brandon Valley, your first teaching job?
My first teaching job was actually in the elementaries in Sioux Falls.
Okay.
So I taught at Hawthorne, I taught at Longfellow, I taught at John Harris, and got to see a lot of different principles in action. So that was good from an elementary standpoint. And then I was an assistant coach at Washington Joelle Benson was the head girls coach at the time.
Yep.
So I worked for her when I first started, and then Jim Trett took over. And then I went from girls to the boys side and did that. I was at Washington for probably 8 years. I was at Augie for 1 year, and then applied and was fortunate enough to get the Brandon job after that.
Awesome. So, and how long you've been at Brandon?
We're finishing up our 21st year.
We're gonna age you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 21 short, wonderful years.
And how many is the head coach?
All 21.
All 21.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. So a lot of changes in Brandon Valley High School over 21 years.
Yeah.
Let's start basketball wise. What's, put you on the spot here. What may be some of the biggest changes? Obviously the game has changed tremendously in those 21 years.
I would, if I had to look at one change that I think has been the best for the state, I would say it's the 35-second shot clock. I think there's nothing I felt better about watching players and watching their skill level progress throughout the years than what I thought that clock did. I mean, basically coaches went from the attitude of, hey, if we don't have if this isn't a great look right away, that's okay, because we can go to 2 sides, 3 sides, 4 sides, and we're just going to reverse the ball until we get exactly what we want. And I never coached basketball because of the entertainment value. I mean, we wanted to win, period. So when you're playing some teams, and not to pick on Coach Munson, but when you're playing, the great Mitchell Colonels of the past, if you're down in the 4th quarter, you're going to either foul, you're going to have some sort of gimmick defense, you're going to have something to speed them up, and hopefully they take crappy shots early, because if they don't, they're just going to hang on to it and beat you by making free throws at the end. So a large part of your scheme, so to speak, became passing and receiving. So I think you saw more upsets back then because we could pass and receive well enough where we didn't have to take shots. And I think with the shot clock, you had to completely get away from that frame mind, that thinking that way. And you just had to turn it around and just say, okay, here's what we're going to do. If that first side shot is our best shooter and he's got his feet ready and he's standing still, that might be like a 27% shot for a guy like me. But for a guy like our best player, that's going to end up being possibly a 40 to 50% shot. We like our odds.
Yeah.
So from that aspect, I just think that changed so much. And you don't, when you walk around now, you can go to every single school. Look how many kids at OG that can shoot the basketball, that you're sitting there going, well, like when we're trying to get ready for you guys, we're like, well, we can't leave him open. We can't leave him open. So it's just, and the best rosters are littered with players like that. Roosevelt's varsity roster, their JV roster would win 10, 12 games this year. I mean, in fact, what they remind me of right now, what Roosevelt reminds me of, quite honestly, is when you guys had it going back in the day, when you were winning all those championship after championship in a row. We'd walk in the gym playing O'Gorman and be, okay, so their freshman killed us. Their freshman B killed us. Their sophomore team killed us. Their JV team blew us out of the water. And now we're going to go get destroyed by their varsity team. And that's kind of what it feels like with Roosevelt a little bit. So, it's just one of those things where you look at it and I think when you take a look at all that stuff, I think the shot clock has led to all that stuff. And again, good players are good players, but I just think that, to me, even at my age, I get my kicks out of, let's find a way to beat their butts.
Yeah,
let's just figure out a way.
I love the shot clock, and what my take on it is also that, everybody thought, oh, it's going to rush people. It sped people up, but I don't see, when O'Gorman goes to play Brandon Valley, very rarely 2 tough teams. Don't get me wrong, 2 very tough and want to play defense and all that, and want to get a good shot, but very rarely does the shot clock get down there. And in AA basketball, anytime, very rarely does the shot clock, not because they're taking bad shots, but you just sped yourself up and you're looking for that quicker shot.
You're looking to attack right away.
The old 5 passes before you shoot.
Yeah.
Well, now it might be 1 or 2 passes, and you got the same shot that you're going to get in 5 passes. So I think it's been like you said, I think it's been a huge asset to the game. We've seen it, start with the college level, oh, this is going to ruin the game. Well, no, I think it's
Mhm.
made it better. So 21 years at Brandon, had to have some really good players come through and really good people.
Sure.
And now 21 years later, you've got kids that probably got kids coming up through.
We do. We actually, and that may be just a telltale sign that it's maybe time for me to give this job to someone who's got some juice, because we have a 7th grader in our program right now that his last name is Pudwell, who Alan Pudwell is his dad, and Alan works for Sanford. He's a nurse. I'm going to butcher the name, a nurse anesthetist or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, that word.
Yeah, whatever. Like, I think he puts people out.
I would have been one of those,
But,
but I couldn't pronounce it.
Yeah, but regardless, he Alan lives in Brandon, and his oldest is in 7th grade, Nolan, and so I get to see Nolan every day in gym class. So I kind of, like, when I see him, I see a little Alan running around, and to me that kind of makes me feel, I mean, it makes you feel old, but at the same time it makes you feel like, hey, this is kind of a neat thing coming back here, around that I get to be long enough in a community, to see this kind of thing happen. And I think that goes to show you what kind of a community Brandon is, that when you have, no different in Sioux Falls, if you're here long enough, you're going to see some of these kids come back and say, you know what, we're going to move back into this area in Sioux Falls and send our kids through the same school system and so on and so forth. Then you have that in Brandon, like crazy. I think and we could go on and on about the school system, but, back when I started, there was 150 kids per class, and now we're graduating almost 385 per class, it seems like. So things have changed immensely in the area. And it's, with Highway 100 opening up and everything, I think it's just going to keep growing. It's not going to get any smaller.
Yeah. And I can tell, you're trying to be nice to all the other schools. And I've brought this up before, O'Gorman or Parkston, where my kids just hugely proud of those communities.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a knock on anybody else. That's just pride, just like you're proud of Brandon Valley. It doesn't mean that O'Gorman's not a good school, or Roosevelt's not a good school, or Watertown's not a great town, but you're just proud of where you're at.
And I honestly think that gets back to the roots that you laid down when you were a kid. I mean, I just think that, I grew up with no fear of my mom and dad leaving each other. And I grew up with no fear of my dad not owning that grocery store, and I knew that we were going to have to go to work every day. And it was just a way of life. And I remember, 22 years ago interviewing for the job in Brandon. I remember telling Marceau right to his face, like, if you hire me, you're probably going to have to fire me, because I'm not going to leave. You're probably going to have a guy for 20 years. And now 21 years later, here we go. So, it's funny how, when you look back, how you don't think about the time, because all you're doing is you're just trying to keep your head down and work, and, and just try to get that next, great team for the community. So I wish I could say that it's been a long haul, but it
doesn't seem like a long
no,
haul,
it
does
goes quick.
And then, obviously, you've had some great teams over the years, come close quite a few times. And then in 2019, you got lucky. You had a great team, played O'Gorman in the championship and won the championship. That had to be pretty special, because you had a great group of kids, but, you talked about, they'd have to fire you, and people don't stay that long for 20 years and not win championships. And you did it.
Here's what I would say about that. There's a lot of coaches out there and I think this is probably the worst part of coaching. There's a lot of coaches out there that are a lot better than I am, they'll be remembered for not winning that last one. And that's a joke. I mean, that is my father-in-law has been coaching for over 40 years in Rapid City, Coach Becky Hammond, Eric Piakowski, some unbelievable players, and was a head girls coach for numerous years out there, and was in probably 17 or 18 straight state tournaments. Like, how am I supposed to, I can't, he's a better coach than I am. Like, when I talk to him about basketball. He's forgotten more basketball than I know.
Mhm.
So to say that, because he never got a chance to coach in a championship game, am I supposed to say that, that to me, that doesn't hold a lot of water. What I feel best about by winning the last one, I mean, when it all comes down to it, to me, it just gets back to that pride of the town that you're growing up in. I mean, you're bringing that championship back to Sioux Falls when you're coaching at O'Gorman. You're bringing the championship back to the entire community in Brandon and Valley Springs, and it's for them. I mean, this has nothing to do with me. I mean, when my time here is done, someone else is going to take over. Hopefully that's a lot younger, smarter, and a lot more juice, and that can do the same, that can do the same things and do it more often. I mean, I think we all hope for that. But I do say that, for all the coaches that are in it to win the last one, I remember when the game, were we happy at the end of the last game? Of course you're happy, but it wasn't any different than any other game. I didn't get any smarter, nor any dumber, from finishing that last game. So I just think that there's way too much pressure, and maybe because of what it's like in the NFL, like when you hear of all the off-season things going on with the NFL. Well, if this quarterback can't win it, we got to get rid of him. Well, there's 32 teams playing at a level that's unbelievably high. We all don't get to, some of us got to settle for Kirk Cousins once in a while, and we got to be okay with that.
You got to figure out something else.
Yeah, exactly. So just from that aspect alone, I just think that it's high school sports, for goodness sakes. I mean, everyone's doing the best they can. And for the most part, we got a bunch of 6-foot kids running around that are just basically doing the best they can, trying to enjoy this game. And sometimes we as coaches are the ones that ruin it for them. But at the same time, all we're trying to do is just put a great product out there. And if we win, I think it's great for the kids and super for the community. But if we're not, I still think there's a lot of programs out there and a lot of great coaches. And as you well know, with just knowing the AA coaches, there's a lot of coaches out there that they're maybe not winning this year, but they're still winning. They're still finding ways to win for their community and for their team just by being who they are every single day. So, obviously it helps to win. But if you can't, you can still it doesn't mean that you have to be a loser. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, you mentioned the other coaches that, you look at the 1 through 18 or whatever, all those coaches are good guys trying to win. They want to win, but sometimes you don't have the talent, and like you said, a lot of them are smarter than us. And if they're not winning the games, it's not because they're not trying or they're not giving everything for the kids. And I think that's a statement, hopefully across the nation, but for sure in South Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all Minnesota guys here too, but I think in Minnesota that, really similar situation, we had Paul McDonald on talking about his dad, Bob, and, these guys that won a ton of games, they did it the right way though. And those kids that played for the McDonald's, that played for you, they enjoy that process. Maybe not every day that,
Mm-hmm.
after practice, some days they probably go, oh, coach, but you said it earlier, the community can be proud of what those kids are doing out there.
Yeah. And I don't think you can ever put a price tag on some of that stuff. And again, it's never an easy situation, and losing is never easy. And sometimes you just got to look at each other and realize you are what you are. And, I've been in a lot of locker rooms at the end. And I would probably even say one of the most disappointing things about winning a state championship is that we never got to take our guys back in the locker room. I mean, you celebrate on the floor, but you never get to get back in the locker room and get to do your own thing. And my son, even sitting over here, just shared with me like a video that he has saved of after a victory when he was a senior. I mean, we've got a big radio with a disco ball on top, and they shut the lights off and stick that karaoke thing in there and turn on some music and start singing and dancing. And it's crazy.
Yeah.
And and those are things that you can't describe. I mean, all you're trying to do is just get out of the way and let them enjoy themselves. But I mean, those are things that you can't replace that.
Yeah.
You know, you just can't. And I think that, you know, that's something that I hope that obviously, you know, and we actually do more of that now than what we did even back then when Caden was in school, because with all the COVID protocols and so on and so forth, we're supposed to go back in the locker room, and then we can't go back in the gym, and they can't. And it's almost a tradition now, at least at Brandon. It probably is a lot of other schools. You know, win or lose, you go out, give mom and dad a hug, go see grandpa and grandma, so on and so forth. You know, well, now we're just sitting in the locker room, cranking up the speaker and just going nuts, you know? So I know it's a different type of deal. But it's one of these things that, like, I'm just so done with this COVID stuff that it makes me sick to even think that we have to, but regardless, I'm gonna say something I probably shouldn't say.
But you mentioned something that was really interesting to me, because you mentioned not loving winning, but, you know, not having that time in life. Because I remember, you know, when we won it, Matt Cartwright's year, that same, you know, everybody's on the floor and you cut the nets down, you're out there for an hour taking pictures, and you don't have that time with you. When you guys beat us in 2019, we got to go in the locker room and we had closure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we got to go around the room and tell our kids we loved them. And I almost felt better after that loss.
Sure.
As far as the closure, and, you know, obviously you want to win and all
Mm-hmm.
that, but you know, those little things that, again, people that aren't in that arena, aren't coaches, aren't players, may not know, but it's a huge part of the process. Learning how to lose,
Mm-hmm.
and being there for each other when you're losing.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those things where, you know, I think that everybody's so pleased that you're there, but when you get to that pinnacle, you so much want to get over the top, and when you don't, it's a shock. You know, it's a shock to your system. And I think, you know, I think when you, like, wrestling to me is probably one of the best examples. Like, when you see a kid that just never loses, and then all of a sudden, you know, watch what they do on the mat when they do actually lose for the first time. They don't even know how to act because they never do it. You know, I just think those are some things that, and I don't think you can prepare yourself for that. I mean, I think that's probably about as real as you can get right there, because you're sitting there with emotions that these kids, it's just like us missing the state tournament last year. And I got in a lot of trouble from some of our administration, but I mean, I was asked soon after everything was canceled, you know, do you agree with the governor shutting everything down? And of course, my first response was, you know, pretty vivid. And it was like, she made a big mistake, because all these teams didn't get to the state tournament because they had a good game or a couple good practices. These kids picked up a basketball second, third, fourth grade, and it became something that they love to do. And it's like, isn't that what we want? I mean, this is what we're trying to build as coaches. And we finally get to the pinnacle at the end, and then they say, no, we're not going to play this thing. And it's like, wait a second, there's one case in South Dakota, and now there's 80,000 cases, and we're still going to have a state tournament. You know, no one's ever come back and apologized to me. No one's ever admitted that they were wrong, you know, and it's kind of funny. It's like having two wives, you know, it's kind of interesting. I know the longer I'm on, the more I'm going to say things to get myself in trouble.
Finally let him off the track. A little bit.
So, yeah, you know, you mentioned the highs and lows of the game, and we can't let you go without talking about the last year. You know, obviously we just mentioned not getting a chance to repeat and how devastating that was, you know, for everybody involved, you know, for the teams that wanted to knock you off, for you, you know, trying to go in there and win another one. But then, you know, you got some news in August, I believe.
Yep. Yeah. In August, wasn't feeling very good for a while. And I was kind of having, like, when every time I'd sit down on the couch or lay down, I'd get a little gurgling in and I just, you know, you do what everybody else does. I'm fine. I'm healthy. I mean, it's at the end of the summer, so I'm actually in shape. I'm down 25 pounds. I'm feeling good. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. And, um, and I, you know, I don't necessarily think I go jogging anymore. I kind of go for short jiggles now is what I kind of do. But, on one of my short little jiggles, I just remember I couldn't get 2 miles into the run anymore. And there was a hill in the middle of my run that I just couldn't make it up anymore. And it was just like, and I'm looking at my watch, my heart rate's not going crazy, but it's like I couldn't take in enough oxygen. Again, I don't think anything of it. But as time goes on, as I'm exhaling, I feel like a gurgling kind of sound. And again, I just think maybe I got the beginning stages of pneumonia or whatever. And I call in, and of course they want me to take a COVID test. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm fine. Whatever. So I keep putting it off. And then I get to August, and my wife finally just says, I can't sleep anymore because your breathing is just driving me crazy. So you need to go in now. And I kind of didn't want to go in, but she's like, let's go. And I go, why don't you just stay in bed and I'll just go in, like, you just get a good night's sleep or whatever. And she's like, no, I'm going in with you. So we went in, and obviously tested me for COVID. That came back negative. Um, we thought maybe it was some sort of infection in my lungs or whatever. And looking back, I certainly wish it was. They thought it was possibly blood clots in my lungs. And but what came back, it was kind of funny when they told me I had blood clots and they put me on blood thinner. And I remember so they bring me up and they say, oh, I got to stay overnight and they're going to put me on blood thinners. I got to stay in my back for a couple of days. And I just looked at the nurse and I said, you got till 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, I'm leaving. And she goes, well, I'll make sure I put that in there. And anyway, a couple of doctors came in later and they said, well, it's not blood clots. And then it came in and did a biopsy of my lymph nodes or whatever. And that's when, a couple of days after that, is when they told me the news that I had stage 4 lung cancer. And I still don't know what that quite means. I know that, like, every time you try to look some of that stuff up on the internet, don't just stay away from the internet. Yeah. It's that they never have good news there. So, but I will say this, like the first 2 weeks after you get the diagnosis, it's literally the worst 2 weeks of your life, because you sit there and you go through everything and all of it's bad. Like there's nothing positive happening. Like everything is negative because you're waiting for your oncology team, for a doctor to make a decision, for your cancer cells to get sent in and sent back and see if anything matches. And so you got a lot of things going on, and there's a lot of questions I had for my wife that she wasn't ready to answer. And so that was a really hard time. But I think the thing that helped me the most was just realizing that, okay, I am 51 years old. I had that's relatively young. So I just looked at it as, if I'm feeling okay, I'm going to go to work. And if I'm not feeling okay, then I'm going to stay home. And I think that's probably the thing that probably helped me get over that initial shock of, like, this is what you have. And I, to this day, you can call it what you want. I don't dwell on it. And really what I needed, and what I think I need, and what everybody needs and deserves is, like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to, that, and I'm not trying to not acknowledge that it's there, but I'm trying to think about, as bad as it might be for me, there's somebody that's got it a lot worse than I have it. There's got to be something else. While I still can have enough juice to give, I need to do whatever I can do. So that's kind of a decision that I made just to kind of, let's get on with this type of thing. So, um, is it bad? Yeah, it's bad, but, I mean, we're all going to get it. I just, the difference for me is my expiration date might just be a little bit shorter than somebody else's, but it doesn't mean that I can't have a really fulfilling quality of life until it's time.
So obviously tough news. But reverting back to being an athlete, competing, wanting to have juice, wanting to, be part of a community, wanting to be there for your family, all those thoughts and had to help you kind of through this as you're still,
Well,
through
yeah,
it daily.
and it's, I'm not going to say that there's not some times where you feel a little bit sorry for yourself, but again, I mean, it doesn't take very long for me to think about Coach Garrow and what he's going through right now with his family, and there's, again, I mean, everybody's going through some tough times. I mean, I've got a father in a memory care deal. I'd like to see some of my former players a little bit more often. I'd like to, I'd like to go see my daughter playing Watertown tonight. I mean, there's a lot of the things that you can look at. It's just one of those things where, the best thing for me is just to keep my mind busy and active and on something other than me. I think that I think that the more dead time that you have, at least for me, then I end up thinking about me, and that's not. I just don't think that's helpful. And again, I can't do it the way I used to. Like I used to get up at 3:11 every morning and get to the office and watch film and be ready for the next time O'Gorman was going to try to kick the crap out of us. I mean, I just wanted to be really prepared every time I'm going into every single game. And I remember mentioning to a neighbor friend of mine, as I just said, I can't do the 16 and 18 hour days like I used to. And he just looked at me and goes, "Are you listening to yourself?" And I go, "Yeah, I guess I am," And he just said, he goes, "If you can't do a 16-hour day, then just stop doing them." It's just that simple. And so I've tried to take the approach where I've kind of given a little bit more to my assistant coaches. And I think that's been helpful, but I'm sort of like that old black lab that turns gray and lays around the corner all the time. Like, at this time of night after supper, I kind of go home and not much of a husband anymore. I mean, we have supper and we sit down, and Jill might want to talk a little bit, and I'm like, out on the couch. But again, it's just, it's just part of the process and part of some of what the treatment's doing to me. So whatever. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Talk about maybe your players, and obviously we're teaching them lessons as coaches. This is a big lesson to teach them. How have they reacted, and then maybe the community. You mentioned Coach Garrow, and I mean, the community's been through a ton.
It is like, and I'll say this. I mean, and I've said this to numerous people that, like, if you're ever wondering, like if the support is really, really good in Brandon, it's better than you can imagine. I mean, it is, what they've done for Chad, and the things that our neighbors have done for us, and our assistant coaches with the stuff with the shirts. I mean, what are you going to do with a Brandon Valley shirt? Yeah, all you guys are wearing them, but I mean, so I mean, and I know that might seem like a small gesture for some, but it really isn't. I mean, to me, it's just it's a tribute to all the classy people that you get a chance to. And I've talked to Derek Roby about this, a million times. It's like, the first people to reach out to us about this was obviously our assistant coaches, our family, and then all the guys you coached against. The Tim Buddenhagens, the Coach Norberg, Watertown and Aberdeen, and it's, you literally spend every waking second just trying to figure out a way to rip off someone's head and just beat them to a pulp is what you're trying to do. You're trying to do it to us and we're trying to do it to you. But when it's done, and again, I don't mean to beat this COVID thing to death, but that's why, the state doesn't want us to go shake game. Screw that. I don't care how many rules I'm breaking. Like that's one that when the game's over, it's over. And then we're people again.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that I don't want you to kick the crap out of us during the game. Like you do whatever you want to do to win that game. I am 100% in favor of that. But when it's over, then you can get together and you can embrace and you can say, you know what, I like your team. Your team played really well and they deserved a victory tonight. And that was a great high school game. And I was just happy to be a part of it, and I think if more people viewed it that way, I think more people would understand instead of having, the dads that stand in the corner with their hands like this. I mean, those are usually the smart ones in the gym, right? So, just from that standpoint, that, all the support that's going on in Brandon from neighbors and from assistant coaches and friends, it is, it's unbelievable. And I mean, they started a new Facebook thing and I didn't even know about it. We were at the Roosevelt game and Mark Miley came up and said, "Hey, gave some money to the GoFundMe deal." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "You didn't know about it?" I go, "This is the first I've heard about it." And he goes, "I checked it out. It's legit." So, I mean, it just, and I don't even know who started it. And I don't know who's behind it. But again, it's just one of those things where it's like, and I know people want to help. But I'm fine. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay.
You mentioned the fraternity of Brandon, which I think is distinctive over the years. I can't remember the specifics, but community puts its shoulder into everything. They get an opportunity to help people out. And then the coaching part of it, fraternity there too. Those are two great support groups right there.
Yeah. Like if I could give any piece of advice to anybody who wants to get into coaching, I would not say don't do it. I would say if you're going to do it, jump in, like and really do it, and then treat it like a marriage. Don't quit, don't leave, don't you're going to make enemies faster than friends. There's no doubt, and it's probably harder in a smaller town than it is in a bigger town because it's hard to disappear. But I think it's just a different type of it's hard to put my finger on it, and you have to understand there's so many different things that you have to learn about each community, no matter where you're at, obviously. But it is, in Brandon, it's almost probably socially unacceptable for you not to go down to the VFW once in a while, at least to show your face, So I just think there's so many neat things about Brandon that are, I hate to say so small town and cliquey-ish, but like if that's what you're looking for, you're going to find it. And if you want to find the bigger stuff, then you can find that too. But I don't have a lot of negative things to say about Brandon. There's just a lot of people that support a lot of different things that are really, really, really good in that small town. And I'm very, very fortunate to be able to have a job there this long and to be able to raise my family there. So again, you could take the whole gym situation out of it. I'd coach it on a tile floor. I'd coach it on a dirt floor. It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter.
Yeah. And I want to go back to something you said, because I think it's something that maybe people that don't coach or, don't quite understand. And I always say this about myself. I'm cursed because I'm one of the most competitive people I've ever met, but I'm blessed because when the game's over, to me, it's over.
Yeah.
And, you coaching against Coach Roby, people would think you guys do not like each other at all because you're going at it, your teams are, like you said, trying to rip their heads off, trying to get a defensive stop, whatever it takes. And, maybe, you're on the ref, Coach Roby's people, oh, those guys they just don't like it. That's not the case. And when the game's over, for the majority of coaches out there, the game's over. You know, you'll go back and watch the film and get better and all that, but it's not something you dwell on, so to speak. And I thought that was interesting that you said that, because that's my mind. Is that something that you see in most coaches?
I think that, I think if you're going to last, if you're going to stick around, I think it has to be. I mean, I think you have to be able to, I'm not saying departmentalize it, but I think you have to be able to, you know, it's no different than anything you do with your team. I mean, you do 1 minute assessments all the time. You can watch them and you can go, okay, what are we doing right now? You know, what are we doing great? But what do we need right now? I mean, there might be a thing or two that we're doing well, but what do we absolutely positively have to get done right now? And sometimes that's nothing. Sometimes it's just like, hey, we got to, you know, when you get a chance to give them a 3 or 4 day weekend, sometimes I think you have to do that. Some of our best practices have been that way, where we've given multiple days off and we come back and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, we got fresh legs. We got horses again, you know? So I think some of that stuff you really got to take like when I was younger, I would have never done that. I would have just grinded them to, you know, like, you know, if we were practicing bad, I'd be like, no, we're just going to stay here longer.
Yeah.
You know, when in reality, what we maybe need to do is just time and score some things, hammer some things out, work on our shell positioning a little bit, and then go, you know what?
Let's get out of here.
Let's go. Or, you know, do some competitive free throw shooting or whatever the deal is. I just think that, you know, those type of things, I think, are things that make your team a little bit more focused, you know, especially towards the end. But again, I tell you, coaching to me is I think when the game's over, it's time to start reflecting, you know. I mean, and I think in a way where, what can you do with your team that you have coming where you can put yourself in a position to beat whoever you're playing. I just think that's our job. You know, we all know that we're going to get judged on wins and losses. I fully understand that, but I think after you've won enough, I think that you just have to put yourself in a situation of what is great about our team and what do we have to do to beat them. End of story. And I think that once you think more that way as a coach, I think it simplifies everything that you're trying to do. I think, you know, and I don't care zone, man. I don't care. You do whatever you want, but I just think that, you know, the more you look at it, you just look at it in terms of, and then you just got to sell it to your team. You look at those guys and just say, here's how we're going to beat them. This is what you're going to do. And then go out there and do it. And you know what? Sometimes you look like an idiot, you know, but when it works, you just kind of like, you know, hey, see, I told you, you know what I mean?
Told you, if you just bought in,
Yeah.
we could get this done. So,
Then if it doesn't work, then the players didn't execute the plan.
Yeah. And trust me, it's a little bit of everything. It really is. I mean, I've sat in front of guys before and just said, you know what? We lost this game and here's why, because I didn't do this and this and this. And we did it after the Roosevelt game. You know, we're down 3 with about 4.5 minutes to go. And their kid hits a 3 and I'm thinking, you know what? We're going to score and I'm going to call a timeout. And we turned it over and they hit another 3 and we're down 9 with 4 minutes to go. And then it's almost over. So it's one of those deals where I screwed up and I told them that after the game. Yeah. I mean, it just, sometimes you just got to own up to it. You know, obviously you have to recognize it, but you know, you just have to own up to it. That's all, you know.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, I appreciate your time. Mick, anything else for Coach before we
Just
let
honored
him
to
go?
be here. Very grateful that you told your story, and in addition to your personal situation, insight into what is to be a coach, what it is to coach young people. I'm fascinated by that. I always have been, and I'm always grateful when we get a chance to talk to somebody who gives us some insight into the decisions that you make, and even like how you evolve over the years and how you look at things, the challenges and how you deal with them maybe a little bit differently as you go along. Just some great stuff there.
Absolutely. Coach, anything else before we wrap up here?
No, I appreciate you having me on. I think what you guys are doing are great. But just, you know, like anything else, it's, you know, keep bringing on coaches. You can bring on coaches that got a lot smarter than me and a lot better looking than me. I got a better radio voice, better radio face than a TV face. That's for sure.
Well, I think that kind of goes with the territory when you're around us, you know.
Yeah, it's not like you're distinctively out of, in a different profile here. You're blending right in.
Yeah. So again, Coach, thanks a lot for your time and you know, being open and honest with everything that we talked about, and best of luck with the season, except if you play O'Gorman again. And, you know, obviously with your health, you know, hopefully, you know, thoughts and prayers out there. I know you mentioned it, and you know, you don't want to be the guy that says anything about it, but there is a GoFundMe page on Facebook. I'll try to share that on my Facebook page to show some support to Coach and everything he's going through. So look for that on my Facebook page. Got a couple things real quick. My dad goes in tomorrow night and then has heart surgery on Wednesday. So lots of thoughts and prayers going out to him. You know, he'll get through this, I guess. You know, I golf with him a lot, so he's got to be ready.
Mm-hmm.
He's got to be ready to golf this summer because that's what we love to do. And then I just saw on Facebook right before we started here, a friend of mine, you know, 54, 55 years old, Dean Rochadle, just had a triple bypass down in Dallas. He's from Tyndall originally, and a good friend of mine. And so we're thinking of you, Dean, as you're going through that as well. So appreciate everybody for tuning in. We went longer than the 30 minutes. I told you, it's like maybe your son left you because he was hungry or you know, because you were going to buy him supper, I think. But I appreciate your time again, and best of luck over at Brandon, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Sounds great. Tell you what, there's nobody hotter than those O'Gorman Knights